You know how sometimes you do something, and at the time it seems like the only thing you could do, but then later you look back and you're like, wow, that was a whole mess. Yeah, well, buckle up, Buttercup, because this is one of those stories. My name's Haley. I'm 28. And let me tell you, Thanksgiving will never be the same after what went down. Never. It all started, I guess, a few months before the actual holiday. Things with Mark, my boyfriend at the time, were fine. They weren't great. They weren't awful. Just fine. We'd been together for a couple of years, living in this decent apartment. He was good at his job, always made sure the bills were paid, which, honestly, was one of the big reasons I stuck around. I mean, who wants to worry about rent, right? Not me. I had my own money. Of course, from my job at the office, but it was nice to have that extra cushion. And sometimes, if I was having a particularly rough week, or I saw something I really wanted, he'd just cover it. It was sweet, really. But lately, he'd been a little checked out. Not like actively ignoring me, but you know how someone can be in the same room as you, but their brain is a million miles away? That was Marco. He'd come home from work, sit on the couch, play his games, and barely look up when I talked. I'd try to tell him about my day, about the ridiculousness of my boss, or some drama at the office, and he'd just give me these mumbled uh-huhs or that's crazy. Babe, it drove me nuts. I'm not asking for a standing ovation, but a little engagement would be nice. I mean, I am talking, after all. And then there was Kevin. Kevin worked at my office. He was new, just started a few months back. Super friendly, always smiling. He'd always listen when I talked about my day, would actually ask follow-up questions. It was refreshing. Honestly, after Mark's endless grunts, Kevin was a total too nice guy. The kind who'd offer to help you carry your files even if he was swamped, or buy you coffee just because. And yeah, I noticed I'm not blind. He was always there, always available, always listening. One evening, Mark and I got into one of those dumb, circular arguments. You know, the kind where you're talking about one thing, but it's really about everything else. I was trying to talk to him about how I felt like he wasn't listening to me anymore, and he just kept saying I was being dramatic. Dramatic. Me, I was just stating facts. He was disengaged, and I was calling him out on it, but he just kept invalidating my feelings. It's not that serious. Haley, he'd say, or you're making a mountain out of a molehill. And honestly, that just made me angrier. I was trying to communicate, and he was shutting me down. So, like any normal person, I started crying. Not like fake crying, but genuine tears. When I cry, it usually gets his attention. He gets all uncomfortable and tries to fix it. But this time, he just sat there, looking at me with this blank expression. That's when it hit me. He was just done. Done with me. Done with us. Done with the whole thing. I felt this panic rise up inside me. What was I going to do? I mean, my entire routine was built around Marky. Our apartment, our shared expenses, well, mostly his, our friends, my life, and he was just sitting there, giving me nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just tossed and turned, replaying every single instance where he'd brushed me off, where he'd chosen his video games over me, where he'd made me feel like I was invisible. It was all his fault. Really, he had created this situation. He had made me feel so unheard, so unimportant. The next day, I went to work feeling totally drained. Kevin saw it right away. Everything okay? Haley, he asked, his voice genuinely concerned. And just like that, the floodgates opened. I told him everything. Not everything, but enough. I told him about how Mark was distant, how he didn't listen, how I felt ignored and unappreciated. And Kevin, bless his heart, he just sat there and listened. He nodded. He offered words of comfort. He made me feel seen. He was so nice. He even said something like, "You deserve to be heard. Haley, you deserve someone who values you." And that's when it hit me. I needed to do something drastic. I needed to get Mark's attention, to make him realize what he was losing. I needed him to understand the depth of my pain, the absolute agony I was going through. And that's when the idea, a really, truly terrible idea in hindsight, started to form in my head. I don't know why I thought of it. Maybe it was something I saw on TV or read somewhere, but it felt right in that moment. It felt like the only way to shock Mark back into caring. So the next time my parents called, I told them. I told them about Mark, about how distant he'd become, about how I felt so alone. And then I said it. I told them I was essayed, not by Mark, obviously, never by Mark, but by someone years ago, someone I'd blocked out, someone I didn't want to talk about. I just needed a reason for my pain. A reason that would make Mark understand. A reason that would make everyone understand. My parents, bless their hearts, were devastated. My mom started crying on the phone, telling me how sorry she was, how she wished I'd told her sooner. My dad, he got all quiet and serious, asking if I wanted to press charges. If I wanted to go to the police, I told them no, that I just needed time, that it was too painful to revisit. I just needed their support, and they gave it to me. In spades, they started checking in on me more, calling me every day, sending me care packages. It felt good. Honestly, to have that level of concern, it felt like they finally understood how fragile I was. And Mark? Well, when I told him, he finally snapped out of his funk. He looked at me, really looked at me, with this horrified expression. He started apologizing, saying he had no idea, that he was so sorry for being distant, that he was there for me. He tried to hug me, but I pulled away. I told him I needed space, that I was dealing with a lot. I weaponized my vulnerability. I guess you could say it worked like a charm. He became totally accommodating, doing everything I asked, walking on eggshells. He'd bring me food, clean the apartment, even try to talk to me about my feelings. It was almost like the old Mark, but better, because now he was actually listening. He even started going to therapy, talking about how he needed to be a better partner, how he needed to learn how to support me. It was honestly kind of impressive how quickly he changed. The only problem was, now my parents were pushing for Thanksgiving. They wanted me to come home, to be with family, to feel safe and loved. And they wanted Mark to come too, to support me. My mom kept saying, "It's important for Mark to be there for you, Haley." And I couldn't really say no. I mean, I had just told them this huge, traumatic secret. I couldn't just say, "Oh, never mind. I'll just stay home." So I agreed. And Mark, of course, was on board. He was still in full supportive partner mode. So the plan was set. We'd drive up to my parents' place in Phoenix for Thanksgiving. It was going to be a big family affair. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the whole 9 yards. I figured I could just keep my head down, let Mark do all the talking, and just play the role of the fragile victim. It wasn't like anyone would question it. Why would they? I was their daughter, their niece, their cousin. They loved me. The drive to Phoenix was long. Mark was trying to be extra attentive, asking if I needed anything, if I wanted to stop. I mostly just stared out the window, occasionally sighing dramatically to remind him of my inner turmoil. He even tried to suggest we listen to some podcasts about trauma, but I shut that down real quick. I'm not ready for that. Mark, I said, and he immediately backed off. Apologizing? He was so easy to manipulate. Honestly, it was almost too easy. When we finally got to my parents' house, it was already bustling. My mom immediately enveloped me in a hug, murmuring about how strong I was. How brave. My dad just gave me a solemn nod and a squeeze of the shoulder. Everyone was being so careful around me, which was exactly what I wanted. I felt like I was floating on this cloud of sympathy and concern. Thanksgiving dinner was chaotic. As usual, the table was groaning under the weight of turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, all the classics. My Aunt Carol was asking me about my job, and I just gave her vague answers, trying to deflect any real conversation. Mark was being the perfect boyfriend, making small talk with my relatives, helping my mom in the kitchen, just generally being Mr. Perfect. I caught glimpses of him, laughing with my uncle, and I actually felt a tiny flicker of something warm in my chest. Maybe this whole thing would actually work. Maybe we'd come out stronger. Then the doorbell rang. My mom went to answer it, and I heard her gasp. "Oh my goodness. Kevin, what a surprise," she exclaimed. My blood went cold. No. Wait. Scratch that. I literally felt my stomach drop, like I'd just stepped off a cliff. Kevin, my Kevin? From work? What was he doing here? I tried to play it cool, but my hands started to shake a little. I took a big gulp of water, trying to compose myself. I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe he was a friend of a cousin. Maybe he was just dropping something off. Anything but what I knew. Deep down was the truth. My mom led him into the living room, and that's when I saw her, a petite, blonde woman, holding Kevin's hand. And then it clicked. My cousin, Sarah, my sweet, innocent cousin Sarah, who I hadn't seen in years, who had moved to Phoenix to start a new life. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. The victim. Haley, honey, you remember your cousin Sarah, right? My mom chirped, beaming. And this is her wonderful fiancé, Kevin, fiancé, F-I-A-N-C-E, fiancé. I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Kevin, my supportive, listening. You deserve to be heard, Kevin, was Sarah's fiance. And then it all started to unravel. Sarah, who was usually so shy, was practically glowing. Kevin and I are so excited to get married next spring, she said, looking up at him with these adoring eyes. Kevin just smiled down at her. A genuine, warm smile, the kind he'd given me when I was pouring out my fake trauma. My Aunt Carol, always the nosy one, piped up, "Oh, Haley, isn't it funny? Didn't you say you worked with a Kevin?" And that's when my parents, God bless their clueless hearts, decided to chime in. My mom, still beaming, said yes. And, Kevin was so supportive when Haley was going through her difficult time at work. Such a kind young man. Difficult time at work? Oh, if they only knew. Kevin, bless his too nice guy heart, actually looked uncomfortable for a split second. His eyes flickered to mine, and then away. He probably thought I was going to throw him under the bus, but I couldn't, not without throwing myself under it first. Then my dad, oblivious to the simmering tension, decided to deliver the final blow. "We're just so glad Haley finally felt safe enough to share what she went through," he said, his voice low and serious, looking pointedly at Mark. Mark, of course, nodded solemnly, putting a comforting hand on my knee. And that's when Sarah, my sweet, shy cousin Sarah, piped up again. "Share what, Uncle?" she asked, genuinely confused. "Is everything okay?" Haley, my mom, trying to be helpful, jumped in. "Oh, well, honey, Haley had a really traumatic experience a while back. Someone hurt her." Sarah's eyes widened. She looked at me, then at Kevin, and then the pieces clicked for her too. I could see it in her eyes. The same panicked realization I'd had moments before. Because here's the kicker. Sarah knew. Sarah knew everything. Kevin, being the overly honest, too nice guy that he was, had apparently confessed his little work crush on me to her, and how he'd helped me through a tough time, without getting into specifics. And I, in my infinite wisdom, had made it sound like this traumatic experience was recent, tied to my current emotional state. The air in the room became so thick you could cut it with a knife. Sarah's face went from confused to pale to a fiery red. She looked at Kevin, then at me, then at Kevin again. The silence was deafening. No one else seemed to notice. Thankfully, because they were all still chattering about the gravy or something equally mundane. But between us, the three of us, it was a screaming match. Kevin, I swear, looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. He probably should have seen this coming. Who tells their fiancé about a work friend who's going through a traumatic experience without realizing there's a massive potential for overlap? What a dumb decision. Sarah finally cleared her throat. Haley, she said, her voice surprisingly steady, considering she looked like she was about to explode. Kevin told me you were having a hard time at work. He didn't mention anything else. My mom, bless her heart, tried to interrupt. "Oh, sweetie." It was very personal. Haley didn't want to talk about it. But Sarah wasn't listening to my mom. Her eyes were fixed on me. "Haley," she repeated, her voice now a little sharper. "Are you telling my family that you were S.A.'d? The blood rushed to my face. I could feel everyone at the table slowly turning their attention to us. Mark, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, squeezed my hand, looking concerned. I tried to backtrack, to minimize. "Sarah, it's a long story. It happened a long time ago. I was having a really rough time, and I needed to explain why I was so upset, but Sarah wasn't buying it. Her voice got louder, and now everyone was definitely listening. A long time ago, but Kevin just told me you were upset about something that happened recently at work. Which one is it?" "Haley, because if you're making something like this up, especially to my fiancé, that's seriously messed up." My Aunt Carol gasped. My mom's hand flew to her mouth. My dad's face went from solemn to thunderous. Mark, bless his innocent heart, just looked utterly confused. I didn't make it up," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. It was confusing. I was just trying to explain my feelings. My internal monologue was screaming at me to just shut up. But I couldn't. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and completely cornered. Then Sarah looked at Kevin, her eyes narrowing. "Kevin, did you know about this? Did you know she was telling people this story?" Kevin, finally finding his voice, but sounding utterly terrified, stammered. No, Sarah. She just said she was going through a tough time, that she needed a friend. I didn't know it was this all." He looked genuinely shocked and betrayed. Which, fine, I guess I deserved that. But Sarah wasn't done. She turned back to me, her eyes blazing. "So you used something like that? You lied to your own family and involved my fiancé just to get attention." Her voice was shaking with anger now. "Haley, that's disgusting. That's absolutely despicable." And that's when my dad, who had been quietly fuming, finally spoke. "Haley," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Is this true? Did you make this up?" I looked around the table. All eyes were on me. My mom was crying. My Aunt Carol looked like she was going to have a heart attack. Mark, my poor, clueless Mark, looked utterly heartbroken and confused. He finally understood that something was terribly wrong. I couldn't deny it. Not anymore. The words were stuck in my throat. I just sat there, my face burning, tears stinging my eyes. Not tears of remorse, mind you, but tears of pure, unadulterated embarrassment and self-pity. Sarah, seeing my silence, scoffed. I knew it. I knew something was off. "You're always pulling stunts like this. Haley, always making yourself the victim. But this is a new low." My dad stood up, slamming his hand on the table. The plates rattled. "Haley, we need to talk. Now, Mark, if you'll excuse us." Mark, looking utterly defeated, slowly got up from the table. He didn't even look at me. He just walked away. Out of the dining room, I knew, in that moment, that we were over, and it wasn't my fault. It was Sarah's fault for showing up. It was Kevin's fault for being too nice. It was Mark's fault for being so distant in the first place. My parents dragged me into the living room, and what followed was a nightmare. My mom was crying, saying she couldn't believe I would do something like that I would lie about something so serious. My dad was furious, pacing back and forth, lecturing me about integrity, about how I had embarrassed the family, how I had manipulated everyone. I tried to defend myself, to explain that I was just trying to get Mark's attention, that I was desperate, that he was ignoring me. But they weren't listening. They just kept talking about how I had used a serious issue for my own selfish gain, how I had betrayed their trust. I kept trying to say, but Mark was ignoring me, and he was checked out. But they just cut me off. It was like they didn't even care about my feelings. My mom said, "Haley, people who actually go through that kind of trauma, they live with it every day. And you just made it up." Her voice was full of disgust. My dad, finally, just said, "Haley, I think it's best if you and Mark leave tonight. I can't look at you right now." So that was it. Kicked out of Thanksgiving. My own parents kicking me out. All because of Sarah and her big mouth. And Kevin, the little snake. I went back to the dining room to grab my purse. Sarah was still there, sitting with Kevin, who looked like he'd aged 10 years. She just glared at me. "Don't even think about coming to our wedding." "Haley," she said, her voice dripping with venom. I just stared at her. What a bitch. She had just ruined everything. I found Mark in the guest room, quietly packing his bag. He didn't say a word to me. He just zipped up his duffel bag and headed for the door. I followed him, trying to say something, anything. "Mark, wait, please, let me explain." He stopped at the door, but he didn't turn around. His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. "There's nothing to explain. Haley, I heard it all. I believed you. I actually went to therapy. Haley, I actually thought I was failing you, and you made it all up." He finally turned around, and his eyes, which had once looked at me with adoration, were now just empty. I can't believe I fell for it. "We're done. Haley, for good." And then he walked out, just like that. After 2 years, just gone. The drive home was silent. Mark wouldn't even look at me. He just drove it, his jaw clenched, staring straight ahead. I tried to talk to him, to apologize, to explain that it was just a moment of desperation, but he just ignored me. It was like I wasn't even there, and when we got back to the apartment, he went straight to our bedroom, packed a few more things, and left. He went to stay with a friend. He said he'd be back for the rest of his stuff later. And just like that, my life imploded. The next few weeks were a blur. My parents stopped calling. My calls to them went straight to voicemail. My Aunt Carol even blocked me on Facebook. Sarah, of course, was telling everyone. She put up a post about toxic family members and lies that hurt the most. Everyone knew my reputation was completely destroyed within my family. I was the manipulative liar, the one who cried wolf at work. Things got awkward too. Kevin avoided me like the plague. He'd practically run in the other direction if he saw me coming, and I could feel the stares, the whispers. I even heard my boss talking about unprofessional conduct in a hushed tone. I knew it was about me. No one said anything directly, but the air was thick with judgment. I started getting less assignments, being left out of meetings. My career, which wasn't exactly soaring to begin with, was now definitely on a downward spiral. It was almost like I was being blacklisted without anyone actually saying the words. My job wasn't exactly secure anymore, and I knew it. And Mark, he actually moved out completely a week later, with the help of his friends. He didn't say a word to me, just packed his boxes, loaded them into a U-Haul, and left. He even got the locks changed on the apartment. I had to call the landlord to get a key, which was humiliating. He took all of his things, even the couch we bought together. I was left with an empty, silent apartment, just me, and the ghosts of all the lies I had told. I tried to reach out to him a few times, but he never responded. I saw on Facebook that he'd changed his profile picture to one of him smiling with some other woman. She was cute, actually, and she looked genuinely happy. He was already moving on. While I was sitting in my empty apartment, eating cold pizza, staring at a wall, it was all so unfair. I was just trying to get his attention, to make him realize how much I needed him. And now I had nothing? No Mark. No family. No friends except for the ones who lived too far away to actually know what happened. And probably no job soon. And the worst part, I still don't really get it. I mean, yeah, I said some things that weren't exactly true, but it was his fault for being so checked out. If he had just listened to me, if he had just been present, I never would have felt the need to do something so drastic. It's like everyone's blaming me for something that he started. I guess that's just how it goes. Though, you try to make things work. You try to get what you need. And then everyone turns on you. They just don't understand. They never do. I don't care anymore. Really, not about Mark. Not about Sarah. Not about any of them. They can all go live their perfect, judgmental lives. I'll be fine. I always am. It's just a little lonely right now. But that's not my fault either. It's theirs. All of them.